Says it's 4 o'clock. Let's call this meeting to order. Harry, can you take the roll, please?
Sure. Mr. Eberl,
Here.
Mr. Kapla,
Here.
and Mr. Schneider,
Here.
Mr. Miller,
Here.
and myself, Mr. Borgman, here, present. Alderperson Wetzel and Fisher, I do not see today, but we have our utility staff with us.
Thank you, Harry. Nick, was the meeting appropriately noticed?
Yes, it was appropriately noticed. It was sent to the City Hall and Library for posting. In addition, went to the various media outlets.
Thank you. Public comment period. At this time, the commission will recognize members of the public who've indicated a desire to address the commission. Upon recognition by the commission president, persons may take up to 3 minutes to address the commission, first stating their name and address. The commission may take action on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. Do we have any members of the public today? No. Seeing none. Commissioner, council, and staff comments. Commissioners, anything? No council members, staff comments today?
None for this evening.
None. All right. Number 5, C2 Makerspace. You guys are up.
Do you want us to stand here or better over
Wherever
there?
is more comfortable for you.
Doesn't matter to us. Thank you for having me, or us, Karen Olson from the Marshfield Chamber. And we're here to give you guys an update on the C2 Makerspace. So it's been a little bit of time. I'm going to introduce you to the director. But just to give you an update, it took us a little longer than we thought. First of all, trying to get Mark here. He's from California. And he had to sell his house and find housing here. And as you all know, housing in the community is a little bit challenging, to say the least. So if anybody's got a room to rent,
That's right, exactly.
So anyway, it's really coming along. We're really excited about it. So again, I'd like to introduce Mark Bowie, and he'll give you an update as to where we are. And we certainly are looking forward to the fall when we will have some type of an open house to get you guys all up to the UW Stevens Point at Marshfield Center to look at the progress we're making and see what we're actually doing. So Mark, take it away.
So by way of introduction, my name is Mark Bowie. I got my industrial engineering degree at UW-Madison in the mid-'80s. My wife and I moved to Southern California in '87. And I worked for McDonnell Douglas and then Boeing for a total of 26 years. After that, I started a high school robotics team and taught engineering in high school for 8 years. And after a year and a half of teaching in hybrid situation in COVID, I decided I was done with that. And what I really wanted to do was teach kids how to make stuff without the burden of having to give them grades and take attendance and report to administrators and stuff like that. So I had been trying to get a makerspace going in Southern California for about 8 years and was making no progress because real estate is so expensive there. And so when I was looking on Indeed classifieds and found the posting for this job, and they had already done all the hard work. They already had a site, they had funding, all they needed was somebody to come and run it, and so we decided to make the move. And so we do know both my wife and I did grow up south of Madison, so we do know what Wisconsin winters are like, so because that's the first question everybody wants to ask. But yeah, we've been in Southern California for 35 years, so it might take a few years for our blood to get thick again, but we're enjoying it. What's going on with the makerspace is we're meeting some challenges with supply chain, as I'm sure everybody can relate to. And once we've selected some equipment, and we cannot acquire it because they can't get the parts to build it. So we're still working on that. We do have 5 3D printers right now, and we have a bench mill, and I'm ordering a CNC router that's made in Minnesota, so that should not be a problem. We should be able to get that one. And so we're slowly making it, but we don't want to. One thing that when I've talked to other people that have started makerspaces, they say don't jump in and get everything all at once, because you really need to react to your community and see how your community wants to use it. And if you buy a bunch of expensive equipment and then that's not what people are interested in, then you've just got monuments that are taking up space. And so we are kind of we've had a little trouble communicating with the schools, because I got here the week after schools let out, and so the communication is not. We've done some surveys, but we're not getting very good response. Once school gets started again, we'll start to get some more feedback on what people want. But we're going to start. We know we're going to have a laser cutter. I just ordered the laser cutter, and so that should be here not too long, a month or so. And the CNC router, and then we'll have lots of hand tools and wood tools and metalworking tools that are available locally, so we won't have to order those. But we're starting to get that stuff in, and we, like Karen said, we have plans for open houses in September. Our first official event is next weekend. Next Thursday and Friday, I guess. The UW Stevens Point Education Department is running a STEAM camp for girls, and so there'll be 20 girls, and the subject matter experts are going, of which I'm one, is going to be teaching student teachers how to teach the campers tech and science and stuff like that. So I'm going to be teaching them how to teach the kids how to run 3D printer, how to design something and then make it on a 3D printer. So that'll be our first official community event, I guess. And then stay tuned. We are on social media now, on Instagram and Facebook. And we have our website is the same as it has been, c2makerspace.com. So look for more news there. We're excited to be here and excited to see all you come and use the facility. Oh yes, the other thing, so like I said, I got into this because I started a robotics club with my son 10 years ago when he was a junior in college, and the robotics club became his Eagle project. And so he graduated, moved away, actually by coincidence, went to film school at UW Milwaukee, and he stayed in Milwaukee, and so now we're closer to him. But we started the team, and what really drove me to this kind of work is that none of the kids knew anything about tools, and they were afraid to use them, and they were afraid to take things apart, and they were afraid to try things. And so I said, this is not good for the future of work, of technical work. And so that's what got me started in this. But the program that we were involved with is called First Robotics, and these are robots that are about 5 feet tall, usually about 30 inches square, and weigh about 120 pounds. Those are like the limits every year. But we have every year in January they come up with a new game, and it's broadcast over NASA TV. And we watch it all over the world, and then we have 6 weeks to design and build a robot that will play the game. And they're usually like 3-on-3 basketball or something like that. So you have to cooperate with other robots and play against other robots. And so it's a very intense event that it's like a small enterprise. Our budget is like $30,000 a year to run one of those teams because of the parts, and it's expensive to run the event, so the entrance fees are like $5,000. And so, but that means that we have to go and get sponsors from local businesses. And a lot of the students that have come back to me have said that was the best experience that they got out of the program, was not the technical stuff that they learned. That was great. But what really put them ahead of all of their peers in college and in the business world was that we forced them to go and stand in front of rooms of adults like this and say, please give me money for my robot team. And they said that put them so far ahead of everybody else. And it's kind of interesting that we start off as this technical thing, but the thing that was really valuable to them was, the soft skills that we But so we are going to start one here. That was all by introduction. We're going to start one here, and we got approved for some funding from the Wood County Economic Development Board, and so we're going to get it started this year. I'm not sure if we'll make it to a competition this year, but we're going to get it started, and it'll be a big deal. It's like it's when the tournaments are like state basketball tournaments. They're big events. So we will keep you informed of our progress on that as well. Any questions? All right.
Thank you.
Well,
Welcome to town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 6, EV charging.
Yes, so in the packet, I gave you a write-up on it, but to kind of summarize it a little bit, Mary Jo Wheeler with Wheeler Chevrolet GMC of Marshfield has been working with General Motors on a community charging program that Marshfield can take advantage of. The program would provide up to 5 dual AC level 2 charging stations in the Marshfield area. The program is structured to look for both public and private locations that could support the EV chargers. And, if you remember, a while ago, we looked at EV chargers, and through Glue, they were running a program that was about $200 per month. So if you looked at over 10 years, $200 per month works out to about $24,000. Through the gracious means of General Motors and Wheeler and Mary Jo's firm, the cost is completely almost completely subsidized by their giving of the equipment, and only has a small amount, about a $1,500 maintenance charge to run for the years 6 through 10. So it's a very great program, and it would help get the local area some chargers. So this morning, Tony and I, along with Alex from our team, met with city staff along with Mary Jo, and kind of explained the program and started looking at some of the locations in town where charging equipment might make sense. Overall, the meeting went really well, and the city staff were very engaged. However, you can imagine that during the conversation, one of their concerns or issues is funding. And the funding is that they're looking at, or the shortfall really, is the infrastructure piece. So you get the charger, you put it on spot, obviously there's wires and conduits and breakers, electrical equipment that needs to connect it, and then there's also foundation work. And what we learned this morning during our meeting is that there's another piece of the puzzle, is that you have to make an ADA compliant installation. So there's additional costs that'll come along with and how it has to be laid out so that it can meet those requirements as well. So in the packet, I know I gave you an estimate of $2,500 to $3,000. Based on our conversations this morning, it's probably closer to $5,000 or $6,000 per installation to make it work because of some of those modifications that would be needed. In some of these locations, what would end up happening is you'd end up instead of putting a charger and it basically sitting in front of 2 spots, you have to put a charger and basically eat up a free spot to make that an area where a wheelchair or some other means could travel to the charger itself and then park on either side. And then you have to make curb modifications and make sure it's at the right elevation. So that's where some of the additional cost comes in. So right now, this program is accelerating and moving quite fast, and looking at trying to get sites locked down here during the month of August, and there's an installation beginning in September. Just going through my notes here. So the city staff kind of took the meeting, and they're going to run with it and identify 3 or 4 different locations in town where they think the equipment will work well, and then they'll give that back to Mary Jo, and she'll put that into the GM system. GM has to basically approve any location where the equipment's placed, because obviously they want to have visibility and utilization. They don't want to see it in a dark alley. There's certain criteria like lighting and such. So they do that. So the reason I brought this for your consideration and review is ultimately the shortfall in the infrastructure cost to help support that process. As I mentioned in the memo, obviously supporting a project of this nature definitely fits within the commission designated fund criteria, and obviously is something that will increase sales as utilization of the charger goes on. It's definitely something that will get community education for something that's definitely coming. And then finally, it meets some of our strategic initiatives as it related to electric vehicles and trying to help foster that moving forward. So first just wanted to get your initial reactions and maybe talk about if there's any opportunity or desire to help partner with this great project that would bring this equipment to town.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, it's something we've been talking about various ways. The question I have is I assume there would be a charge to the person using the charger? Who receives the revenue for the charge?
The way GM has it set up is that, yes, the site host, so in this case, it would be the city, or I know Mary Jo is also working with some private organizations as well, who have the ability to monetize. They could do it free, or they could set up a pricing structure to help offset the cost of the electricity. And they could, there's many ways that this could be done. It could be just an hourly rate. It could be an hourly rate that escalates so that it incentivizes them to move their vehicle after a few hours instead of being parked there the whole time. It could be elevated to help cover additional costs that this infrastructure costs or other means. I think it's hard to know over the 10-year window the utilization. I think as we look at it right now, obviously the EV population, and I know Tony could probably speak to that as well, there isn't a lot in the local area. But obviously all the auto manufacturers, they're obviously putting a lot of resources into that effort. So I'm sure we're going to see more penetration. And obviously having these in town may bring those that are traveling by or traveling near to stop in as well.
Is there a compatibility issue, or is it just GM vehicles only then that could pull up to these?
No, so I believe, and Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Tesla has their own model, if you will, and then I believe there's two other standards that have been developed for chargers, and this is a universal charger, so it'll work with those others, and even work with Tesla. Tesla, I think, has a conversion kit that they can convert from this standard offering to fit their needs of their vehicle.
I think they have an adapter. I got a couple of questions, Nick.
Yeah.
What does GM get out of this?
I think it's just to help accelerate the movement of the electric vehicles that they're going to bring to market. I think obviously range anxiety is obviously one of the big issues that's out there, and the access to charging infrastructure. So as they can roll this out and put more infrastructure out there, people find it, see it, they'll become more comfortable and obviously lead to more sales down the road.
Yeah, they'll buy more electric vehicles. I mean, that's the goal.
Well, can we expect Ford to come out with a similar program then, V&H?
It's definitely possible. I mean, I've had some initial conversations with them. They haven't alluded to anything of this nature at this point. But as we look across the city, I know that Hotel Marshfield has some Tesla chargers. I believe Midstate Technical College has a general charger. I believe V&H actually has a couple on site. I know Wheelers is working on putting out a couple on site as well. Those are the ones that I know of for sure. So unfortunately, there aren't a lot currently out there for customers to use.
So 5,000-6,000, is that the initial shortfall that we're looking for?
Per charger.
Per charger.
Per charger.
Yeah.
So we're looking at 5, it's 30,000.
Plus $1,500 a year in years 6 through 10.
6 through 10, yeah. Well, that's a long time away.
So I guess a couple things with that. The $1,500 is the total. I guess it's $300 per charger times if you're doing 5 chargers, then you have $1,500 annually for the 5 years. I've kind of structured it with the city and basically looking more at, and as Tony and I looked at this, we thought it would be best to focus just on the infrastructure shortfall and not necessarily focus on that piece, knowing that the city could monetize it, and that amount being a little bit smaller could possibly put a surcharge on to help with that shortfall. The $1,500 shortfall.
Example of the city putting a surcharge on it.
Let's say the cost per hour for them for the electricity is $2 per hour. They can make it $3 or $4 to charge, and then that extra dollar or two would help offset that cost. I think they're also looking at the contract with General Motors and with Mary Jo, and looking at if there's a provision that it's only a 5-year program, and then the city would have no out-of-pocket cost. Those details are still being worked out, though.
And are you just proposing that the utility be involved in public-sited ones?
Correct.
Okay.
Only other question I would have is who would cover liability in case something happens?
That's all being set up in the arrangement between the site host, the city, and Wheeler Chevrolet. And Mary Jo.
Okay.
There's an agreement, they call it a site agreement, that has to be executed between all of them to establish those different components.
And the maintenance is on GM likely, right, for the duration?
Yeah, during that first 5-year window, there's a maintenance charge that it's a $300 per charger site that actually Mary Jo and Wheelers would pay, and that would cover the maintenance activities. There's also a warranty piece in there as well, so that would help to take care of any of that piece.
Is there any branding that's going to be displayed on this?
There is. As you can imagine, General Motors has their requirements for this, and there is some branding that allows, I believe, General Motors and the local dealership to incorporate their branding. If we wanted to incorporate something for the utility, it would probably need to be a standalone, separate item.
Yeah, I think we should, if we're gonna be a part of this program, we should be part of the branding as well.
A few months back, we approved a program to give a rebate for charging. How's that program doing, and how do you envision this interacting? Because are we looking at entertaining each particular proposal that comes along for this when there sort of is the start of a program? Just say more about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess as far as the program that you passed, I believe it was 25,000 total dollars that you provided us to allocate to customers that buy an EV. It was a $25. If they bought an EV and put in a level 2 charger in their home, it was $500. And then there was another piece for higher level charging. That program is in its development right now. We're working with some of the local dealers on some of the brochures and some of the details. We just had legal review here in the last month on the agreement, so that should be coming out here shortly. As far as how it works with it, and yeah, I mean, obviously electric vehicles is very new, and that's something, once in a lifetime type opportunity. So there's a lot of opportunity here, and we're just trying to grab onto some of the things that are coming through and trying to embrace them. This opportunity through General Motors for the city, I think, is just with the generosity of how the program is set up. I think it's a great opportunity to get something out there and get more penetration in our city, so that more customers, people feel more comfortable buying EVs, and people maybe even come to the town more, so help with the tourism side of things. I think that we could take some of the dollars, since we've not allocated all of them on the other project. We could take some of those dollars and carve it out for this project. We should also note that this 5,000 to 6,000. It's definitely possible, and as you consider ideas, and if you decide you want to put forth some dollars, the structure of it, I would ask for it to be flexible, because one site might take 3,500, the next one might take 5,500. It just all depends on the nuances of the site. How far we have to put pipe in, or electric wires, things of that such.
Who sets the price then, as far as when they charge? Is it through the city?
Yeah, the site host would have the opportunity to set that.
Just to be located on private or public property, right? So is it like right on the curb then, you thinking, or?
This morning, our discussions were around a number of locations. We looked at Wenzel Plaza was an area we looked at. I think that one's going to be kind of tough, just given the limited parking that's there now. But we looked at, there's a parking lot that's north of there by the police station, just south of the police station. So we're starting to look at that one to understand, the layout there. That one might be one where the infrastructure, if you will, if you have, these are your 2 stalls, if you will, 2 cars. This charger would be off to the side to allow it to make that connection. We also talked about the library community center potentially. And then there's also the parking lot that's just across the street there to the west, behind Mittens and Royal Tokyo and the coffee and place and such. So yeah, in those locations, it would you would take out a center spot. You'd have 3 spots in a row. You take out that center spot and allocate for the infrastructure near the curb, if you will, but obviously make it so it's ADA compliant, and then allow the courts then to stretch off. We also talked about Wenzel Plaza. Wildwood Park and Zoo. There's an area in there where there's some parking that might work out well, kind of in the middle, kind of to the west of the Wildwood Pavilion. Because there's already a transformer there, there's electric service, there's a panel, there's all the, the main stuff is already there. So it could be a less expensive installation. And I know Justin from Park and Rec talked about maybe Greasy Park, maybe the Van Hay Waters, might be some other areas. But, it's one of those things. We also talked about the Ball Diamonds, the Steve J. Miller and such. There's might be some other areas. It's difficult though because some of those locations are only seasonal. So trying to balance all that and try and get the best return on the investment.
Yeah. And then what would happen if we didn't like it after a year? Can we back out? If it looks hideous or whatever it might be?
Well, this is really going to be an agreement between the city and General Motors and Wheeler.
Okay.
We're just helping to infuse some capital to help the process move along.
Gotcha.
So if I understand what you're clarifying there, we wouldn't be a party to the project other than giving seed capital for infrastructure, or
Okay.
providing infrastructure.
Exactly.
That takes a little bit of stuff off our back, so that's good.
Yeah.
We're just helping out the city to
Make it happen.
Gotcha.
make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously this has to, this is one piece. All of this is kind of moving relatively fast, so that's why this is kind of coming in and we don't have all of the details. But then, we have to submit locations. General Motors has to approve those locations. Then if they're approved, we have to, obviously, the city has steps that need to go through to, initiate the agreement. There could be some placement that needs to be approved. There's a number of pieces at the city level that would need to be done as well. And then obviously putting in all the infrastructure. So, it's just one step in the process. I brought it now because just there's so many pieces and I don't know when they're all gonna come together. And I felt like I had enough detail to give you a sense of what the scope was and what the ask would be.
So I think the potential options are, if there's no appetite for that participation in what you've described, that would be important to convey. If there's enough appetite that you want to fund it and say that right now, contingent on it happening, that's an option. And then somewhere in the middle, we could as a commission say, we like the idea, we think we could see participating in funding the infrastructure, but we need to know more before we're ready to make a commitment.
On the surface to us, it looks good. We're probably going to sell more kilowatts. It's growth there in our sales.
And support the rollout of the new technology.
And, Wheelers will have access to the charging history as far as how many customers, things of that sort, and I'm sure they'll be willing to work with us to give us some of that high-level information so we can understand patterns and utilization, things of that sort.
So I think there's two things now that we would want out of participating in funding infrastructure. One would be the branding or co-branding or some honorable mention, and the other would be the data.
I think it's enough to move forward, yeah. To me, it does. Yeah.
I certainly think we need to move forward. It's all the newer technology. We need to embrace it, and we need to be a part of it. As an electric utility, there's no doubt in my mind that we need to move forward with it. And what are you looking for a commitment? I'm thinking 30,000
That's
out of the
seems to be a-
designated fund.
That gives Tony and I a lot of flexibility out of the gates, and obviously we'll report back if indeed that's the route the commission would like to go. Right now, the number of sites the city's looking at could be anywhere between 3 and 5.
Yeah.
So it's, 30 would hopefully be the maximum that would be needed, given our initial estimates, and I would expect it to come in somewhere less than that, but
Do you need a motion from us? Okay, so I move that we support the creation of the EV charging stations.
The pursuit of the
Pursuit of
proposed
the
GM
proposed,
program.
yes, to support the infrastructure, the initial infrastructure, to an amount not to exceed $30,000. And in return, that we would ask for branding of some type, or mention, I just said honorable mention. I kind of like that idea. And then we would also like to have reported back to us usage on it.
Access to the data.
Access to the data for usage. Is that pretty much covered?
Contingent on it receiving all the necessary
Yeah,
approvals.
contingent on this moving forward through the city and GM and Wheelers.
You got all that?
No reference to the 1500 year 6 at all yet? Would it be needed?
I like what Nick said, that let the site host deal with that.
Okay. Okay,
You want
there
to come
you go.
back to us 5 years from now and say, you know,
Well, they do have the ability to pick it up in the charge, in the
in the
what they
chat,
charge
yeah,
for.
yeah. So I think there's options there.
We're
but
gonna
I
know a
think we'll
lot
get us-
more in 5 years.
Yeah, you're also gonna know if, is this a growing thing? Have we even
Yes.
gotten off the ground, you know? 2 people a year use it, well, that might, you know.
If you put one in an absolute dud of a site, can you unplant it and relocate it somewhere else? You got more infrastructure cost, but it's reusable.
Possible, I suppose.
Yeah, I would think that if situation dictated, I'm sure that GM would be flexible. I mean, they want to see more charging, so I think that would be in their best interest. I think it'd be feasible.
Interesting.
Right, then we could put one in each of our garages.
And then a lot
I
of
don't have
the
an electric car.
Well, not now.
snow plowing and that, and whatever, keeping the site clean falls on the,
Yeah, city.
Site
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 owner.
host or site
So
owner.
we're not involved in the operation of, we're just enabled.
We're enabling.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yep, that's
I
fine.
like that position. All right. So we have a motion. Is everybody clear on the motion, or do we need it repeated?
Second motion.
Second? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 7, MU Commission Governance. We have 2 left. Is there anything from a review of the remaining 2 that we would like to discuss, propose a change?
When was the last time attorney reviewed these?
When they were created about a year,
About a year or so, a year and a half, 2 years ago, somewhere in there.
Gotcha. Yeah. A lot of legal stuff in there, just curious. Yeah. So it's recent enough.
recent enough.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the closed session, if that's what you're referencing, those are all verbatim from state statutes. They're nothing,
You can propose a change, but
those are copy directs. The only thing I would note is at the bottom of the first policy, would be policy number 11,000, which relates to meeting minutes. That last paragraph talks about you can get copies of the commission meeting minutes by requesting them from the utility, or they can be viewed on the city's website. The under residence agendas and minutes of Marshfield Utilities, that's incorrect. So that does need to be updated.
Okay.
okay, because the city doesn't put them on their website.
They do it just under a different URL or location now, so I do need to update that.
Okay. They're
So
not where
just
they
wanna
used to
change
be.
it to on the city's website.
Yeah, that's probably not a bad idea.
Okay. Everybody good with that change? All right. Is that all we need there? Anything else on those 2 policies? Number 8, building update.
Yes, so during the month of July, progress has been slow due to some of the subgrade soil issues that we've encountered. Ultimately, additional breaker run is being installed to ensure the proper soil stability. They're working on that as we speak. As we talked about last time, that additional breaker run will dip into the project contingency fund, but that's why we have a contingency fund. Just want to note that overall, the project is still under budget compared to where the authorized amount for the project. We expect steel work to start later this week or early next week at this point, so things are moving along. And as I wrote in the write-up, just as it relates to the soils, we took the conservative approach in putting together the specifications in the bid documents. We basically, took the most favorable, assuming the most favorable results from doing the proof test as the baseline, knowing that if anything failed, then we would have to, make an additional excavation, put in additional material. That was just done so that we didn't, pay for more or put more in the specifications than was needed. And then we captured it this way. So things are working as we had planned. It's just, obviously, this was a larger one, but like I said, we're still under budget for the overall projects. And as far as the schedule, it did take a hit into the schedule, but we're still expecting to be finished before the end of the year, and that's been our target all along.
Thanks. Any questions? Commission KPI discussion. Last month, we threw it back to Nick.
And I threw it back to you again.
Ask your hand out. I had a few thoughts.
Speak.
Okay. What I handed out, part of the thing that I did for 10 years for the hospital was serve as a black belt and a lot of project management, and part of that was KPIs for each of the projects that we had. So in thinking about this, I put a few thoughts together. And one of the approaches that we used, and this is just an idea, is that in looking at KPIs, trying to identify key existing or potential problems is often a good first step, because you want to know what's worth measuring. So where are you having difficulties, or where would having difficulties really hurt you, especially at the commission level? I mean, that's the little stuff, day-to-day stuff, that's more staff and so on. That could include new programs, like this electric charging program, for instance. Would we want a KPI around the utilization and that? Although I don't know how much it would hurt us, but it's just, just an idea. One of the things that we learned early on at the hospital is just because someone says you have a problem, you may or may not. So if you don't have a problem and you can't prove you have a problem, do you really need to measure it? And I'll give you a lot of good examples of, everybody on staff would say, oh, we have a problem with this. And then you go out and get the details and he really didn't have a problem with that. It was a one-off that got a lot of the rumor mill going. I mean, that happens. So I think you just got to be careful with that. Problem solving, the method we used was DMAIC, and this is just an aside, but define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. The key measure off of that is the last one, control. It's the one that everybody fails at, but that's where your KPI comes in. Because what you're saying is you need to control it by have ongoing monitoring long after the problem has been, quote, solved. Because what we found, quite honest, is everybody's gung-ho the first 3 to 6 months afterwards, and then the performance just drops off. But you got to keep measuring. So just, don't get in the trap of saying, well, it's fixed, and walk away. What we looked at was 1 or 2 KPIs to measure current and future performance at a level of interest for the commissioners, in our case. In other words, we don't want to get stuck in the mud, but what are those big things that at a commission level we think would point us in the right direction? And we should help to identify those problems or potential problems, and then we task the GM with creating the solutions and approving the metrics or the KPIs. We can help, but it really comes from that. And then we monitor the results, again, through the staff and then the GM. One approach is you can look at if you want to start at an area and say, okay, what is really critical for the people in that area? They do the job every day. What are the things that they see that if it changes really impact the organization? Oftentimes they know far better than the 5 of us sitting here. So that's one approach. Then you do have to determine if there is a problem to try to fix if the problem exists, but and develop that KPI. But you do want to measure again and again. And then you can reduce the frequency of measures over time. And it doesn't have, just because you start with doing something monthly or quarterly, doesn't mean you can't make it semi-annually or annually. And
Thought is that the KPI should be approved by the GM, shared with the commission. Results of subsequent measures and action plans, again, shared with the commission and by the general manager and the staff. Because I think we got to make sure we aren't getting into operations. We're staying with identifying and directing, not resolving. Okay. The bottom, I just went through the long list and picked out 14 things that made sense to me, but really that's all dependent on what I said to start with. You know, they're just ones that I've either seen used or had a pretty good results from. But again, that doesn't mean that that's anything that is of key interest to us. To me, it has to be a key interest. You know, if this gets out of whack, are we going to be in trouble? Maybe it's not out of whack right now, and that's great. But if it doesn't, you know, otherwise, what are we measuring it for? And a lot of things we already measure that could be KPIs. It's just that we don't call them that. We don't do a formal write-up of them. You know, we figure out our profit margin. We know what our return is. That's really something, if it gets out of whack, we are in trouble for. So, but we don't call it a KPI. We could. And then you track it. So those are my thoughts.
I can see why you're a black belt, like a ninja out of nowhere, just come up with this awesome stuff.
Yeah, I did it for a long time.
Good stuff, Paul.
Yeah.
So inherent in what you're saying and with the KPI, you can't really have a item that you're measuring without having a, so to say, a green, yellow, and red. You gotta have a standard
That's what it is. You have to have a
of what's
standard.
acceptable. So even in your example of our profit margin, we haven't set
That'd be the next step when you
a
create it.
standard for what's acceptable and not acceptable for a profit margin.
And the good and the bad on that one is, you know, the state tells us what our maximum or minimum rate of return can be. So does that become the middle? I mean, you know, that's a discussion, but you'd have to, we're not as free to pick as some industries would be in that regard. I mean, we kind of have a guide from the state to get us started. But yeah, you're right. We haven't formalized that. A lot of our metrics, we just haven't formalized, you know.
Well, and I think you know, in your at the commission level, what are we most concerned about for the organization? You almost have to start with what's the problem and then back into
That's why I said,
what's the measurement. Yeah, because you know, when I think about what concerns me, you know, it's the future power supply portfolio, which we've spent a lot of time talking about and working with Nick on. It's things like, you know, the age of the infrastructure and how does that relate to the depreciation rates, so that we're keeping up on our infrastructure for the long term. I don't know how we'd encapsulate temporary problems like the lead service issue that we're dealing with or the PFAS issue. Reliability, which is the first thing that everybody always pops up for a KPI, almost seems purely operational.
it is, but.
Unless you can break the components of what leads to.
Well, that would be, though, that's probably even more operational. But if you looked at the, you know, the reliability, you could look at either the number of outages, the downtime caused by the outages. That could be the commission level. Then we look at Nick and say, well, what are you going to do about it? You know, that's more, he operationalizes it then. So you could set one up that way. And you would say that if there is a standard out there, or you look at your current and you say, okay, currently it takes us, I don't know, I'm pulling numbers out of the air, 30 minutes to respond. Well, we think that's okay, because we don't get a lot of complaints. Great would be 15, horrible would be 45. So there's your green, yellow, red.
Yeah, and I think as I looked at what you wrote, and with that example in particular, one of the things I struggle with is there's a lot of variability in responding. You know, just
Yeah.
in that particular example, you know, where were the crews prior? Calling them in, some live a mile away, some live further away.
Yeah.
If there's a big storm, it might be that your house was, you know, when we don't get food for a number of hours.
The number of outages caused by the problem to begin with determines the
response time.
Right.
I mean, that's fair.
And then the safety aspect, so if we have this metric of like, we want to respond so fast, our guy's gonna now travel faster than they should have, or do something that they cut a corner here so they can get to the next one sooner.
Or the storm's still going on.
Right, yeah, it's just, yeah, have to be mindful of the reaction if you're trying to set a standard by
Yeah.
staff to get to that standard.
Therein lies the fallacy of averages,
Yeah,
to be honest.
yeah.
But you do need to have some kind of parameter. You can explain the exceptions,
Mm-hmm.
that you just mentioned a good number of them, but how does that still fit into the expectation? And then the commissioner, whoever, can buy into that or not, but you know, that's, I think, what, one of the ways you can assess it.
So where do we want to go with this? Something we want to continue to pursue?
I think we should pursue it. Yeah, of course.
Would, and we talked about this last month, and then you reference it again this month. There are a number of measures through the course of the year, the reliability one being a great example. We see it once a year. There are a number of measures we're already involved with. Would those measures, all on one piece of paper, be the first place to start?
I think that'd be an excellent place to start, and to limit it to,
Well,
More
first of all, what are we all looking at?
Well, yeah.
Do we need to continue to look at it?
yeah.
Does it meet the standard for going to KPI, and have we set a standard for its performance? And does that then take us into the discussion
Yeah.
that we need to have?
And then, you know, annually, or more, whatever frequency you wish, but annually, you can review your KPIs and say, we still need to measure this, it's not a KPI anymore. You know, we've been good at it, we're doing good at it, we don't see any you know, and there might be some that you keep doing for years and years. But you always want to kind of limit the number, because you get too many, and pretty soon none of them matter. You know, that's the other side of this. We've seen that in a lot of healthcare problems.
Paul, would you, like on this monthly recap of the financials,
Uh-huh.
would you turn some of that into KPI in your mind?
Oh, yeah. But a limited number. You're
Yeah.
gonna pick one or two out of there, and then you're gonna probably do something on reliability, and you know, you gotta, but yes. And you could put it on one sheet just like that is. I mean, that's a great starting kind of point. But you wanna pick more than just the financials.
Yeah,
Not that they aren't important, because they are, but.
yeah. I guess
So
you have,
is risk management.
I mean, some of the categories that Nick had here when it was listed, actually,
Mhm.
you know, you take one or two out of each and you've kind of got your number. Not that the ones that are listed are what we should use, but per category.
No, there's lots of
There's lots.
interesting numbers, aren't there?
Uh-huh. But what really tells us if we're going down the tubes or we're doing well? I mean, that's kind of the way to assess it. And that's not easy to determine, but that's kind of the thing.
And tells us early enough that it's still fixable.
Yeah.
it should probably reflect like our vision statement too, I would suppose, like,
I just brought that up.
It all plays in. You know, technically, there should be there's your vision statement, there's your mission statement, there's your one-year plan of action or a three-year plan of action, and then there's your KPIs. And they should all flow down from that. Now, that's ideal, but that's really how it should go.
makes sense.
Yeah, they almost have to be created with your
Yeah.
strategic plan.
Because when you say, what should we be doing in a strategic plan? Well, what are those 5 KPIs telling us? That's what we should be doing first. And
So
then
it's not a report card on the health of the utility,
not solely.
because it's
Yeah.
changing
It's
based
changing.
on what the priorities are.
But it does give you an overall view of whether your utility is doing better or worse, just
Against the plan.
against the plan. Yeah.
I could see limiting it to 6 would be, it's gonna be hard to do.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, there's no magic in that, but
Yeah.
it's, what you don't want to see is 24 things down there.
Yeah,
And you're trying to track them all and get reports on them all and know, you know, which way is this going? Not going to happen.
yeah, makes sense.
Now,
there might be 24 KPIs within the utilities if you drill it down to the next level, but based on all the different departments, that's 2, 3, or 4 piece.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would expect that Nick and the department managers already have a lot of those measures.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
And hopefully then, you know, but you could say, then you need the red, green, yellow. So when am I out of whack on this measure? Oops, sorry. We will turn that off.
I can appreciate that ringtone.
Yeah. Little Star Wars there, keep us going. But yeah, that's, you know, that's what you can do. Because then those would also help you to drive when you want to change a KPI at our level. Because you might look at something that says, oh, there's a measure in Kent's area that isn't moving the way we want it to. And so what do? Is this something we now want to make? So. But that takes time to get to, I mean, but that's what can happen.
So how do we pursue this as an ongoing working project here over the next couple of months?
Here's an idea, I'll throw it out there. I guess based on, you know, the comments that have been made, I wonder if the team and I could just go through the annual material that we provide to the commission and just summarize those that could be KPIs and use that as a launching pad. Just to say, all right, these are, you already talked about reliability, obviously we do main breaks, obviously the financials, there's a number there. You know, just try to summarize those and use those, digest those a little bit and see if those are hitting the mark or if we need to make adjustments from there as one option.
Is there a key customer service one?
That's a good starting point because that gets us into the discussion of what are we really trying to look at with this, and is that really what's important?
I want to give staff input into what they see as being important too.
Yeah, we could take it to the next level.
Yeah.
What we provide now and then what maybe some additional ones that we feel are.
Or how you tweak it
Yeah.
as it comes up to us. Yeah. I like
Everybody good with that idea?
Sounds great.
Everybody good with that?
I appreciate all the work that went into listing all of these. There's just
Yeah.
a ton of them.
It's a good start.
And to boil it down to
Yeah.
20, 30, that's going to be a task.
Yeah.
But it's a good start.
Thanks for bringing out your back up.
Yeah. Once in a while it comes in handy.
I think we're going to count on it coming out more often for a while.
Yeah, that's it.
Is this something, I guess, do you have a definitive timeline? I just want to make sure I'm meeting expectation on that.
A couple of months.
Yeah, I think this is going to be something that may take us a couple of months. Are we saying we absolutely want this on next month's agenda? Is that what you're asking?
Correct. I think we
I
should
think we
give
want
them
to
more
see it
time.
done right.
Yeah, done it right, so.
So if it takes a month, if it takes 2 months. Waited 6 years. You're just going to toss PFAS and lead to John.
You can, yeah, sure. If I can finish my comment here, my note.
Number 10 is PFAS and lead update, and John, Nick tells me you're up.
Okay. As of the end of July, we reached the number of 195 lead services replaced. So we are well over our number for the year, which is good. We're well on pace to do 300 for the year, give or take, depending on how long or short the construction season goes once October hits. So I'm very pleased with that. Some of the reasons that we've had for increased activity is we made some changes earlier in the year. We went to 4 10-hour days so guys could get more installed per day. We did also sublet out our excavation services, so when we have a contractor doing the excavation, we're still there and doing the labor, but they're actually running the machine. But we have basically another 2 more people to staff and that helps us out quite a bit. So we're really happy where that's going. Kind of puts us on pace for about a 10-year window, or maybe a little less than a 10-year window, which is better than the 15 that the DNR has proposed, right? So I think the community generally will be very happy with our action level in that regard. Any questions on lead before I go to PFAS?
No, I think you guys are doing great on that.
The PFAS, we did, as you guys approved the feasibility study last month, we are working on some contract details with SCH. We had a kickoff meeting a couple weeks ago, so we are getting started on that moving forward here fast. There isn't a whole lot of update there just because there hasn't been one until we get the contract details worked out. We haven't had a whole lot of movement there, but we will be going forward here soon. You saw that the EPA had put their health advisory out there, so we will be taking that into account as we do the evaluations of all our facilities. If that's where they're going with that, that's going to be a game changer.
I think the biggest thing that's happened is we have a standard now for at least 2 of the compounds.
Yeah, the DNR's standard of the 70 parts per trillion actually came online here August 1st. As you saw in the report, well 25 is the only one that doesn't meet that standard. However, if we would say shut down just well 25 and open up to others, knowing what we've seen happen to Eau Claire and their contamination and how they've dealt with it, it is my belief that because those wells are so tightly located into the same aquifer, that we can just start pulling that PFAS to those wells. So we still maintain that all 4 of those wells at Southside are, for the time being, are shut down. And on that note, just to let you know that on last Thursday, we had 2 significant main breaks at the same time that were combined with probably flowing roughly 500 gallons a minute, and we were able to survive. So we can handle, with a high demand day as a warm day that it was, plus the main breaks going, we were able to survive without that coming online. So we still continue to meet our needs, so to speak, without those 4 wells coming on. I was, though, monitoring it very closely because when I saw the size of those 2 breaks and knowing how long it takes to fix them, I was watching them to make sure that we were going to be okay. In fact, I was making calls to local people about fire conditions because I saw the fire trucks go out at the same time that the main breaks happened. So I was worried that maybe there was something going on because the regular demand did seem pretty high at the time as it was. So I was maintaining contact there to make sure nothing was going on that I wasn't aware of.
Okay. Well, I think the standard it's good that there was finally action on that. I thought the most interesting comment in the newsletter, though, was, that somebody made sure to put in there, it's likely to change. So I think as we continue down this road, we have to,
EPA is working on that.
we need to think beyond what the standard today is. Other comments on that? Number 11, job orders. You didn't have any for approval. Number 12, bills and payroll. Thank you, Kent. The motion to approve the bills and payroll
So moved.
by Nate, second by Ari. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Previous meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve those by Paul? Second by John. Anything need to be fixed? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Financial reports.
So I just wanted to highlight or talk about, we talked a little bit about lead services, and if you remember when we did budgeting time for the water department, we were being aggressive on the lead services, knowing that we'd be eating into cash. So I think on the balance sheet, one thing that I just want to point out, especially it'd be page 3, which is the water utility balance sheet, you'll see the due to, due from, and you can see that the water utility's cash holding, if you will, went from, at the beginning of the year about 2.5 down to 1.8. So it's about $700,000 of, and a large percentage of that can be attributed to lead service replacements. So this is something that we're managing and monitoring. Right now, we're in the heat of the replacements. Obviously, we're seeing a huge, expenses and so forth. This is all capital, so you're not gonna see it on the income statement. The income is doing well, but obviously from a cash flow perspective, we're gonna be capitalize those items, and you can see that it's taking a bite out of the cash. We should see some replenishment as we get into the later months when we're not doing the replacements, when that capital expenditures slow down. But you can see that that's occurring. As we look forward, obviously, we could be thinking about bonding is obviously one thing that we could do in future years to help offset that. So we're not, we'd have the cash revenue coming in through the bond proceeds versus eating into our cash reserves. Another thing that I've been thinking about is, we talked a little bit about this last month with PFAS, is that likely in 2024, we'll be probably doing some capital expenditure for PFAS treatment of some sort. And that may require us to do some bonding, and what we could do at that time is then lump in some additional funds to help with the lead services. So those are just some things that we're looking at and thinking about, and I just wanted to just make you aware of it, just so that you guys can be thinking about it as well, especially as we get into budget time. I mean, the alternative here is obviously to slow down replacements and fit more within the means of our typical budget, but obviously that has impacts as well. So kind of all the options that we need to balance here as we continue forward.
It's a good highlight. How does a non-income item like this fit within a rate case which starts with the profit and loss?
So what'll happen is, Kent, correct me if I'm wrong, but this, lead services are capital assets, so they get capitalized. When we go in for a rate case, that'll increase our rate base, or our plant base, and then there'll be a depreciation that is as part of the revenue requirement back from our customers. But even with if we do $500,000, for example, and you're depreciating that over 40 or 50 years, you can imagine the revenue that we're getting back from our customers is very small. So we're always going to have that deficit from a cash flow unless you have bonding or some other means put in.
Right. So you're paying today's cash to get 1/40th or 1/50th back every year.
Yeah, is that, the schedule on service, is it 40 years?
We talked about this at budgeting time, and we talked about this when we were talking about, do we do the lead services over X years or Y years, and how it was going to affect our cash flow. So it's good of you to raise it back up.
Yeah, and if you remember at that time, I think we even did projections for rate adjustments to help offset this, and we could see that no matter if it was a short term, the 5 years versus 15 years, that the rate impact was going to be very small in either regard, just because of that. The recuperation is through the depreciation from the customers.
Yeah, it's always been interesting to me that so much of the way that the regulatory agency wants the utilities to operate is with mandatory debt to pay today for the future recovery,
Yeah,
which just costs interest.
Right. Well, it's possible we have that, that unique piece now to help with main replacement, as we look forward. Maybe at some point we try to look at lead services, and maybe there's a mechanism there to do something similar. Obviously could have an impact. It provides cash, but there's also other impacts that have to be balanced in that discussion. I believe Janesville, correct me if I'm wrong, John, as they went for a rate case recently, maybe a year or so ago, they added the main depreciation similar to ours, but they actually have the line item on the bill. It's a separate charge that shows up, so that there's a little bit more visibility there. And,
I like that idea.
Yeah, it definitely helps show where the dollars are, what they're for and where they're going.
How many years can you accumulate costs for if you were doing a long-term project like the light thing? Can you lump 2 years of cost into a future bond? Can you lump 3 years of construction cost into how long can you do a project and then do takeout financing?
I believe it's a 3-year window. I'm not positive off the top of my head if we get the bond proceeds and then you can start using them, or if you can use them previous.
So when we get to budgeting time this year, maybe we need to look at, is there, do you do 2 separate accelerated sprints and look at financing around that?
Yes, yeah, put all your resource, yes, take all your resources and try to, instead of knocking out 300, knock out considerably more than that in a year, yes.
Yeah, and then lump them all into a financing.
Yes.
Okay. Other conversation or comments on financial reports? Number 15, closed session per Wisconsin State Statute 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility for the purpose of discussing personnel updates. Is there a motion to go into closed session? Back to you, yes.
So moved.
Second? We have a motion and a second. We have to call the roll vote, Harry.
Oh. Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr., yes,
Yes.
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 Mr. Kapla and Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Borgman, yes.
We are in closed session. We'll recess for a few minutes.